They once called it paradise. A land of peace, beauty, and promise. But now, people aren't dreaming of living there, they're desperate to escape it. In the past year alone, more than 130,000 New Zealanders made a choice once unthinkable. They packed their bags, left their homes, and walked away from the country they were born to love. And they're not traveling for adventure, they're fleeing for survival. New Zealand, a nation once envied by the world, is quietly collapsing from the inside. Families can't afford food, young people have abandoned the idea of ever owning a home. And for thousands, the country that once felt like freedom, has started to feel like a prison. What happened to this so-called paradise? Why are nurses, teachers, engineers, and entire families running for the exits? And could the same disaster be coming for your country next? This is not migration, this is an exodus, and it's worse than anyone expected. Every year, an entire stadium's worth of New Zealanders disappears. Not for holiday, not for study, not to explore the world. They're leaving permanently. In the last 12 months, more than 130,600 people left New Zealand, the highest number ever recorded. But the real shock isn't how many departed, it's how many are never coming back. Over 52,000 citizens vanished from the population in a single year, even after counting those who returned. That's not movement, that's loss. One former resident put it simply, "It wasn't our first option to leave, but staying became impossible." And where are they going? Mostly across the Tasman, Australia. In 2024 alone, New Zealand suffered a net loss of around 30,000 people to Australia, the biggest migration drain in over a decade. Why? Because over there, someone doing the exact same job, a nurse, a teacher, a technician, an engineer, can earn 25% to 50% more for the same work. When groceries cost more every week, that difference isn't luxury, it's survival. This isn't a handful of backpackers looking for sunshine or adventure. This is a record-breaking escape, led by the very people who keep a country alive. They aren't just leaving, they're giving up hope that life will ever get better if they stay. People don't abandon their homeland because they want to, they do it because they feel cornered. And in New Zealand, three forces have collided to push its people to the edge. 1. Housing has become a luxury most will never touch. New Zealand now has some of the most expensive homes on earth. Since the year 2000, house prices have risen 4 times faster than wages. Young people aren't asking when they'll own a home, they're asking if they ever will. In Auckland, the average house costs nearly $1 million NZD, that's over 14 years of the average salary, without spending a cent on food, rent, or bills. It's not a goal anymore, it's a fantasy. 2. Renting is no longer a safety net. If buying is impossible, surely renting should work, right? Not in New Zealand. Auckland's average weekly rent is around $650 NZD, and the national average sits at about $575 per week. For many, that's more than half their paycheck, gone before food, transport, or utilities. Almost 1 in 2 renters spends over 30% of their income on housing. A quarter spend over 40%. Rent isn't shelter, it's a trap. 3. Inflation set everything on fire. In 2022, inflation hit 7.3%, the highest in over 3 decades. Groceries, building materials, fuel, essentials, everything exploded in price. Even when prices slowed, they never dropped. Millions were left behind, still paying 2024 costs with pre-2020 income. And the worst part, wages didn't keep up. While prices surged at 6-7%, incomes only rose 4-5%. That means real pay cuts for most households. People worked as hard as ever, but their money bought less and less. This is where the breaking point began. When shelter becomes a dream, food becomes a fight, and wages fall behind, people stop complaining. And they start leaving. New Zealand's housing crisis didn't appear overnight, it was engineered over time by 3 critical failures. Small diamond failure 1. Not enough homes where people live. Experts estimate the country is short around 65,000 homes, especially in major cities like Auckland, Wellington, Hamilton, and Christchurch. Yes, more houses were built between 2018 and 2024 than the population growth required. But most of those homes were built in the wrong places. In the cities where people work, study, and raise families, demand crushed supply, and prices soared out of reach. Years of slow government planning and red tape made it nearly impossible to respond in time. Small diamond failure too, a central bank mistake that exploded the bubble. For years, the Reserve Bank kept interest rates extremely low, even holding the cash rate at 0.25% and pushing mortgages to 1.99% during the pandemic. Cheap borrowing turned housing into a frenzy. In just 2 years, from 2020 to 2021, prices rocketed 32%. That's not a market, that's a detonation. People didn't just buy homes to live in. They bought to get rich. Small diamond failure 3. Investors took over the dream. As house prices exploded, wealthy investors moved in. First-time buyers and working families weren't just competing with each other, they were competing with people buying second, third, or fourth properties. The result, a new kind of country. A small class of owners growing richer. A growing class of permanent renters left behind. By the time the government tried to slow investors with new rules, the damage was already irreversible. And this disaster didn't stop at housing, it infected everything else. The cost of living surged. Stress skyrocketed, and the first people to run were the ones who had options. If buying a home became impossible, renting should have been the safety net. Instead, it became the second trap. In cities like Auckland, the average rent is now around $650 NZD per week. Nationally, it sits at roughly $575. For many people, that means over half of their income disappears the moment rent is due. The numbers are brutal. 56% of people in shared housing spend more than half their paycheck on rent. Nearly 46% of all renters pay over 30% of their income just to keep a roof over their heads. 1 in 4 renters spends more than 40% of their earnings on housing alone. That leaves almost nothing for food, medicine, transport, or dignity. And it's not just financial stress. It's psychological warfare. A generation is being raised not on dreams of owning a home, but on the fear of being priced out of shelter altogether. Parents are working multiple jobs. Students are skipping meals. Entire families are making choices between rent and groceries. Renting isn't a stepping stone anymore. It's a cage, and the door is locked from the outside. But housing costs were only one half of the collapse. The other half, everything else became unaffordable too. When housing was already strangling households, another crisis hit, and this one attacked everything else. In 2022, inflation in New Zealand surged to 7.3%, the highest in over 3 decades. Overnight, the cost of living detonated. Groceries skyrocketed, building materials surged, fuel prices spiked, everyday essentials became luxuries. 1 in 4 New Zealanders reported they were struggling just to survive, and nearly half were worried about keeping their jobs. Even as inflation later slowed, prices never returned to what they were. People were still paying 2024 prices with pre-2020 wages. And that's the key, wages didn't rise with the cost of living. Not even close. While prices were jumping 6% to 7%, wages crawled up by only 4% to 5%. That meant real pay cuts for millions of people. People were working just as hard, but could afford less than ever. Food prices went up 17% in just 3 months at one point. Disposable income shrank, families cut meals, postponed medical care, and delayed paying bills. Even when wage increases finally hit 7.6% in late 2023, all they did was barely pull people back to where they were before the damage began. And by then, the fallout had already triggered something even worse. A collapse in the very systems a country needs to function. When the cost of everything explodes but your paycheck barely moves, survival stops being a lifestyle, it becomes a calculation. For years, New Zealanders watched prices outpace their income. Between 2021 and 2022, inflation sat at 6-7%, while wages only rose 4-5%. That means most citizens took a real-life pay cut, even while working the same hours. Imagine this, you earn the same salary. You work just as hard, but your money buys less food, less fuel, less life. That's not progress, that's erosion. Even when wages finally jumped to around 7.6% in late 2023, it was too late. By then, people were already buried under the cost of housing and essential goods. It didn't bring them ahead, it only dragged them back to zero. And this wage crisis didn't just hurt households. It triggered something far more dangerous. The people who keep the country alive left, because while pay stagnated in New Zealand, workers across the Tasman were earning 25 to 50% more for doing the exact same job. Why stay and struggle, when leaving means survival? And so it began, a mass departure of the country's most essential workers. A country doesn't collapse when tourists leave. It collapses when the people who run it do. And that's exactly what's happening in New Zealand. The nation is bleeding out its most essential workers, not slowly, but in waves. Healthcare on the brink. In just 1 year, nearly 12,000 nurses registered to work in Australia, a 53% jump. Hospitals are understaffed, patients are waiting longer, and the system is gasping for air. Education in crisis. The country faces a projected shortage of 1,250 teachers in 2025. That means larger class sizes, fewer subjects taught, students paying the price, tech and engineering hollowed out. More than half of IT workers in New Zealand are already immigrants, because the country can't produce, or retain, its own skilled professionals. Why is everyone leaving? Because across the ditch, pay is higher, housing is cheaper, quality of life is better, and opportunity isn't a fantasy. This isn't just a brain drain, it's a system drain, the removal of the very people who keep hospitals open, schools running, and infrastructure standing. And when a country loses its workers, it doesn't just lose talent. It loses function. That's when economies begin to fall. Not in theory, but in real time. New Zealand isn't just struggling, it's sliding backward. The economy is shrinking, productivity is stagnant, and prices are rising faster than wages. But the most painful part, it's not a sudden crisis, it's been building for years. Recession in disguise. New Zealand has fallen into what's called a technical recession. 2 quarters of negative growth. People losing jobs. Businesses closing. Confidence shattered. And while politicians use softer language to calm the public, ordinary New Zealanders feel the blow every day, especially in their wallets. A debt time bomb. The cost of governing the country is spiraling out of control. Housing unaffordability. An aging population needing pensions. A healthcare system running out of staff. Infrastructure stuck in the 1990s. How is the government keeping things running? One word: debt. Debt isn't dangerous on its own. But New Zealand's economy isn't growing fast enough to pay it back. That's what turns a loan into a weapon pointed at your future. Businesses are feeling it too. Exports are weakening. Interest rates are crushing small businesses. Tourism can't cover the economic holes anymore. When the cost of living rockets and the value of work drops, economies don't survive, they deflate. And here's the terrifying truth. New Zealand isn't at risk of breaking. It's already cracking. Every collapsing society has a moment where fixing the problem is no longer about recovery, it's about survival. New Zealand is inching dangerously close to that line. When problems stop being isolated, New Zealand doesn't just have one crisis. It has multiple crises feeding each other. Skilled workers are leaving. Services like healthcare and education begin to fail. More citizens lose faith and follow them out. Tax revenue drops. Debt rises to fill the gap. The economy weakens. Cost of living goes up. Even more people flee. That's not misfortune. That's a death spiral, reaching the tipping point. A country can survive being expensive. It can survive losing affordability. It can even survive low wages. But it cannot survive losing its workforce, its confidence, its future taxpayers, and its young generation. Once these pillars go, a nation doesn't decline slowly. It collapses rapidly, like a building with no support beams. The final warning signs. New Zealand is entering a stage where reversing the damage may take decades. Outsiders stop seeing it as a land of opportunity. Citizens stop believing things will get better. The people left behind carry the costs for those who escaped. If nothing changes fast, it won't just be a struggling country. It will become a place people pity instead of pursue. A country doesn't die overnight. It fades while everyone argues about whose fault it is. But here's the truth. New Zealand can still be saved, if it acts now. The problems aren't mysterious. The solutions aren't impossible. What's missing is the will to make hard choices before the damage is permanent. 1. Stop the talent bleed. Before anything else, New Zealand must keep its people by making the country livable again. Competitive wages, affordable housing, lower living costs, incentives for skilled workers to stay. If the nurses, builders, teachers, and tech workers keep leaving, the system will hollow out from the inside. 2. Fix housing before it becomes feudalism. Housing can't just be an investment game for the wealthy. Policies must massively increase supply, rein in speculation, support first-time buyers, prioritize homes for citizens, not portfolios. If people can't afford to live, they won't live there. 3. Rebuild essential services. A nation's strength is measured by its systems. Healthcare that has staff, schools with teachers, infrastructure that works. Right now, these sectors are running on fumes. 4. Stop pretending tourism will save the economy. Tourism is not a strategy. It's a bonus. New Zealand needs innovation, exports, industry, not just selfies on mountains. 5. Tell the truth, then act on it. The worst thing a country can do is pretend everything's fine. People leave when they lose faith. They stay when they believe change is real. The window is closing. If action is taken now, bold, urgent, and unapologetic, the country can still turn this around. If not, New Zealand won't just lose its workers, homes, and economy. It will lose its future. New Zealand was once seen as a dream destination, clean, safe, peaceful, and prosperous. But dreams don't collapse in a single day. They erode, one policy at a time, one departure at a time, one ignored warning at a time. Here's the brutal truth. A country where citizens can't afford to live in their own cities. Where the people keeping society alive, nurses, teachers, builders, are fleeing abroad. Where housing costs crush dreams and wages can't catch up. Where talent exits faster than it's replaced. And where the economy survives on debt and hope does not remain stable for long. This isn't exaggeration. This is the mathematics of collapse. And by the time the rest of the world notices, it's already too late. The final question. New Zealand is standing at the edge of a cliff. It can either jump by ignoring every warning, or fight by rebuilding before the foundations crack beyond repair. But here's what history shows. Countries don't fall when outsiders attack. They fall when insiders give up. And right now, the people who haven't left yet are asking themselves one terrifying question. Should I stay, or should I escape before the lights go out?